We got a pretty interesting news story to talk about tonight. Dan sent me this morning, and I thought it was a really good. It's a good news story and it's a good topic, but it's from Outdoor Life. In the description below, you guys can see the article we're going to talk about and read it if you want to later. But a guy shot a buck that was in a study down in Mississippi that MSU was doing. It was buck number 140, and this buck had articles written about it because it had been migrating 18 miles every year. It's down there in the South Delta, which the reason they have to migrate down there is because it all floods out every year. So the deer all have to move. And this particular deer would move 18 miles.
18 miles. That's a pretty good poke.
Yep. And what was unique about it is obviously he would summer in Louisiana and he would winter in Mississippi, and he'd swim the Mississippi River.
Didn't it say something like a mile long stretch of it?
Yep. It's a mile long.
A mile over the river.
Yep. 2 times a year. And it was pretty funny. I was reading through the article, and the guy that shot it here, I'm going to go ahead and I'll share my screen real quick so you guys can see how big the buck is. It's a dandy buck. There's the buck. But
for down there, that's huge. I mean, that's for a buck in that area, that's a huge buck.
Yeah, and he it said is exactly what wildlife management unit the guy was. He got killed on public land. It said exactly what wildlife management unit he shot it on and everything. I was like, golly, they got a little more detailed than I would with that. He gave up some information, but I assume that, I mean, obviously they know where it's at because it was GPS collared.
Those transient deer, though, I mean, that could show up anywhere. You know, it's traveling through there. You know what I mean? That's not a deer that was born and raised there. It doesn't mean it's a great area.
No, but it just made me laugh.
Right.
Anyway, and actually the GPS collar had fallen off of the buck a couple weeks ago, but it had fallen off in that wildlife management area.
Ah.
So it had been actually living there for a couple weeks.
How'd they know it was that buck then?
Because it has ear tags, 140 in it. See it?
Oh, I see that now. Yep.
Yeah. But they said in the study,
I thought maybe it was one of those new woke deer, trans deer earrings.
Oh, geez. Maybe so.
No, those are tags. Okay.
Yeah, they're tags. Yeah.
Rainbow deer.
There was a doe in that study that, well, I guess made this one look like a walk in the park. I guess she would migrate 35 miles.
Wow.
Every year. Yep. Yeah, I guess they're going to test it for a whole bunch of stuff just to see. Just they talked about, they got it into like some CWD testing and whatnot, just to see how far those things can spread, and hopefully it tested negative, and then that doesn't get brought back up, or get. I don't know. It just, anytime we start talking about CWD, it always makes me nervous. Yep. And they did say, though, they have a bunch of collared deer in northern Mississippi, and every single one of those bucks they have collared stay roughly in an 800 to 1,200 acre range. They very rarely go outside of that range, which I thought that was interesting too. But I haven't read a whole bunch of studies about collared deer, but this one made me want to like dig deeper into them and learn more about.
There's some interesting stuff you get off of those studies.
Yeah, for sure. And like this deer, I mean, that was interesting to me because like this one was on public land. This wasn't a deer. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I hit the wrong button. Wasn't on the, some managed farm or something. He was everywhere essentially. Anyway, have you ever like had a deer on camera and got him somewhere different, way far away on a different camera or anything, or saw him somewhere different?
Yeah, I've tracked deer for distances. It's seldom it gets over a mile or so, but I've seen deer that like I'll watch all summer. They
Yeah.
disappear in the fall, and you hear about somebody shooting them 5 miles away. And I can remember a couple of really big deer that they would routinely come in for a few years of their lives. They only live so long, but for a few years I watched them, and they'd be there right up until hunting season, and then they would disappear. And sometimes I'd find them through shining or glassing or something, and they would be quite a ways away. But I can remember places I hunted where you'd have one buck that was there all the time. It's a matter of where he is, where he's hiding, but he'd be within this one little square area of, say, between roads of a half-mile square, and he'd always be in there.
Yep.
And then another buck in that same area, same time frame, would show up for miles all the way around there. I've seen deer that do routines like almost like a weird type of, you wouldn't call it migration, but a movement pattern where they go in a circular fashion and they're on your property for like 3-4 days.
Yeah.
And then they're on the next one, and eventually they end up back over by you, and maybe it's 3 or 4 weeks later, and they go in a circular pattern. And I can remember one relatively large, non-typical buck that had big drop tine that I was after, and that one I knew somebody who was hunting it a couple miles away, and I'd monitor when he was seeing it, because it gave me a clue of when it would show up by me, because I started to figure out this pattern. And the best time to hunt him would be when all the rubs and stuff were old, because you knew he was coming.
Yeah.
But I don't even think he got harvested, because I would have heard about it. So I think he just died someplace or something, or maybe got winged. But yeah, it's kind of strange how they have movement patterns like that.
Yeah.
We often talk about how you got to hunt a deer individually. People are always like, well, how do you do this? How do you do that with deer? What do deer do in this situation? Well, what does that deer that you're hunting do? If you hunt specific animals, you really start to notice that each one is an individual, just like people.
Yeah.
Just like you might have some person who flies all over the country and is in a different state every other weekend, or whatever. Then you got some people like, think of an old grandma who never leaves her house. She has somebody shop for her and everything. She just stays in the yard. There's deer like that,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a deer I've been chasing for a couple of years now, and like he's always in this particular area. I mean, I have cameras around the surrounding areas, and I very rarely get him on those other I never do. No, not even rarely. I never do. But I'll get him like anywhere from August till, and I'll find the sheds in February up there, where it's just like he does not leave this area. He knows it. He knows how to be safe in it, and that's where he likes to be.
That's why I get a lot of people that raise an eyebrow when I say this, but mature bucks, especially your older mature bucks, like say 6-7 years old, I think are easier to hunt usually than your younger bucks, because they'll get in an area they know it really well. You can't even really bump them out, because they think they know more than you about the area. They'll just move around. Where those little bucks will just fly out of Dodge and relocate someplace in another bedding area. But you can get some of these older bucks. I think it's a trend with older bucks where they will hold up in a spot, a good spot, and never want to leave. And you can just come in from different angles and try and hunt them, and they can be a lot easier to hunt than a younger buck, with the exception of they're very intelligent about how they move, when they move, and if they're being hunted, and they can just lock down and disappear and not move in daylight if they want to. But as far as knowing where they're at, seems to be a little easier to pattern them to a spot.
Yeah. And when you say smaller deer, you mean like 3-year-olds or
right. And, you bump a 3-year-old, and even though that can be a really high quality rack sized deer, I mean, they have more of a tendency than say a 6-year-old to go taking off. But again, you got to get back into the individual deer. Every deer acts differently. Like this deer that we're looking at is obviously not no little 3-year-old looking at that picture, especially for that area. And that one was moving quite a distance. So that one was not shy about moving at all. So every deer is an individual. I'm just saying it's a trend more with older deer than it is with younger deer.
Yeah, for sure. I was wanting to make sure you clarified, like, you said small deer, young deer. Like, you're not talking about year-old deer, year-and-a-half-old deer. You're talking about, like, you know, I wouldn't agree with you that a year-and-a-half-old deer is easier to, or a 6-year-old's easier to hunt than a year-and-a-half-old. But I think you meant,
it depends on what you're looking at. If you're hunting a specific 1.5-year-old, you might be surprised because.
I guess I've never put myself.
They'll get out of Dodge and move to the next county. But then again, now you're probably right because, like on Dave's farm, I know every deer on there, and I'll see the same year-and-a-half-olds day after day after day because of daylight. So you're probably right there.
Yeah.
I just don't even think of, when I'm referring to deer, I'm not usually referring to 1.5-year-olds. I think of them as squirrels. They're not really deer.
Yeah, right.
Hey, everybody. If you like the channel, make sure you subscribe right here. And if you like the clips, I got 2 more options for you. 2 options right here. Subscribe right here. See you guys.